And thrilled to have you kick off this year's lecture series. So Tala Safié, everybody.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here. So, I basically joined the New York Times about 5 years ago. My current job is to design and produce digital stories. So I do a bunch of things. Part of my job is commissioning illustration. These function as sort of online covers for articles. I work with illustrators who have different skill sets and styles. And my job is to sort of pair the right artist with the right article. Some pieces are more serious, like this one. Others we can have more fun with, like this. Some require animation, and others are sort of more straightforward portraits. And the most important part really is the fit tonally and editorially. So this is a piece, for example, like a critical take on how tech companies are attempting to make crypto and NFTs kid-friendly. So we worked with this artist, Sihan Park, to create a dystopian playground for kids. And we kind of inserted scenes inspired by Zuckerberg's Intro to Metaverse video, the scary one. And there's something kind of amusing about applying this very 2D, flat, naive, cute illustration to Zuck's like very techie VR fantasy world. And I kind of work closely with the artist to identify these little moments and opportunities for humor. Sometimes illustration is used as a branding device to make a column look cohesive, like this series of literary travel guides that we publish. The illustrator here, Raphaël Macaron, her distinct style kind of helped these different articles look like they belong to the same family. Same here for this monthly column, 5 Minutes to Make You Love Jazz. We used illustration. We worked with, we're still working with Dante Zabala to create those whimsical animations that make the column easily recognizable by our readers. I also try working with more traditional analog artists and painters when I have the chance and the time, because these take more time. Like Chase Hall, who immortalized an iconic scene from The Wire in this painting. Or Iman Raad, who made this embroidery. Or the Savelos brothers, who created one of their charming hand-lettered posters just for us. Sometimes we team up, like we try to team up with kind of unexpected people. In this case, it's data artist Mona Shalabi, who created a diagram for us about actors that are frequently cast in Wes Anderson movies. We provided her with the data, and she created a heat map to reflect the numbers. And this was the result. Mona usually tackles like really serious subjects like gender and wealth disparity, so it was fun to see her apply her expertise to a lighter topic, and I hope we didn't waste her time. In some cases, I get to collaborate with our culture photo editor to commission and art direct photo shoots, like for the series of photographs that involve a snail as the main protagonist. The artist created an actual set and shot an actual snail. Her name is Velveeta. And this snail helped us convey the scale of the mini brands, which are very small objects in the form of products, which was the subject of a critical essay by one of our writers. Sometimes we make our own illustrations or like top art. In this case, we wanted to create a topper or art for this piece about these in this house signs that became sort of like a liberal mantra at one point and got a bit out of control. So we created the sign generator that would spit out slogans that get more and more weird and absurd when you click. So it's like kind of gently poking fun at this phenomenon. Another part of my job is to work on these sort of bigger story packages that generally require custom presentations that are done outside of the usual New York Times CMS. And those kind of require months of production, and they're usually a big team effort. So in addition to my small team of visual editors on the culture desk, we collaborate with other entities in the newsroom, like video or audio or photo editors, etc. And so these are usually conceived and built from scratch. And we package these stories using different design tools that we all use, like typography, art direction, UI, grids, layout design, visual editing, etc. And this is a recent one that we published for the 50th anniversary of hip hop. It was a big project. It was kind of like a beast project. Our reporters spoke with 50 rappers who told us about their first memories of hearing hip hop. And we kind of documented the history of the genre through their stories. So it's basically an encyclopedia. It's like 45,000 words or something. Each rapper have their own sort of card that includes a classic photo from their era, an essential song of theirs, and their oral history. And one thing to note is like the structure was conceived before the reporters even started reaching out to the artists. And the point being here that designers and visual editors, or like my team, was brought in early on in the process to help the word people kind of think of the shape of the story and the kind of content it wants to hold. And I think that's what made it strong. And in terms of like the actual graphic designing, we wanted the package to have a striking look and striking visual language that feels special and reflective of the subject matter. So we dug into a big archive of hip hop magazines for inspiration, especially when it comes to typography and layout. This is another example of a story where the visuals were quite prominent. It's a piece about Arab drag queens and the pop star that inspired them. So like, who's the Dolly Parton kind of the Middle East? We asked that question. And so we teamed up with the photographer Mohammed Abdouni, and we asked 4 queens to recreate a look of their choice from Arab pop stars who inspire them. And so our direction played a big role here. And this was the final result in the online presentation. The images were collaged in this sort of cutout style to recreate a feeling of scrapbooky fan collage, particularly inspired by this reference that we really like. We also commissioned the designer Wael Murkos to create custom Arabic lettering of the name of each icon. Sometimes we work on more complex stories that require more design thinking and concepting than just simply directing a photo shoot. This is a story about the importance of alt text and the people who are trying to make it better. In alt text, for those who don't know, it's basically image descriptions, so people who are blind or have low vision rely on them to be able to navigate the internet. So we made this interactive that recreates the experience to the reader. So we stripped away all the visuals and we highlighted the words instead. We even included bad alt text, as generally a lot of alt text is badly written or just ignored, to also communicate that challenge to the reader. So the Mona Lisa, for instance, is described on the internet as painting of a person and maybe an image of one person and strawberry. In some cases, the design plays a major role. It actually creates a framework or a vehicle for the writer. This is a visually driven series that I worked on with my colleagues called Pattern Recognition. And in this column, we look at how multiple works share common patterns, which can lead to bigger discussions, like what do water bottles and stand-up teach us about comedy? Or what do Meryl Streep's glasses tell us about cinematic tropes and how to own them? And the idea originally came from these like stupid Instagram accounts and collections that we liked. Specifically, this night lotion one on the left that archives all the bedtime lotion scenes in movies. And, so we sent out a call for pitches and asked our critics if there are any patterns that caught their attention. So we sent the static mock-up to try to explain what we're trying to accomplish here. We also asked for a larger thesis from each of them to be made instead of just simply identifying a collection. Because we want the column to be more than just detecting a trend or identifying a trope. We want it to be smart and have, someone smart say something smart about it. So they are backed by intelligent essays. This is the latest one that we published. I'm gonna go through it. Oh, wait. Yes, okay. So in terms of design, okay, are you supposed to move? Yeah. In terms of design, we had this sort of dynamic layout in mind. So you have this modular grid, and depending on the argument that our critic is making, you can zoom in and out on specific boxes in our carpet. So as you can see, the writing corresponds to what you're seeing, which is quite satisfying, I think. So this one was about the trope of like normal people suddenly letting loose. And, in ads, movies, music videos, etc., from the late 80s to the early 90s. And basically what that says about the emotional state of that era. It's loading a little slowly, but it works. Okay. So, in this format that we created, text and images are deeply linked and they can't really work on their own. So the writing process is a lot like storyboarding. We use a doc like this one to work with the writers, and the critics' words kind of should always point to something that they're seeing on the screen or on the page. It's a narrative quite similar to documentary. We call it visual argumentation, where, the text should be thought out in dialogue with the images. And so once this machine was built, most of the work goes not into the word editing, but in crafting all the visuals. So the image, the video research, the creation, even the pacing, the rhythm, all of this stuff actually takes a ton of work and needs to be carefully planned. And we kind of figured out those specs and rules as we go. Because, you want to avoid an annoying Giphy effect. You want to still make it a nice experience for the reader to just read through it without too many distractions. So all of this stuff we kind of figured out. We're still figuring out. So, with this series, we kind of gave our critics a tool to play with, a vehicle to address corners of art and culture that they don't usually get to write about. We also, most importantly, showed them the importance of thinking visually, and overall the potential of visual criticism. It doesn't need to be a 3,000-word essay, always. Sometimes we get to create and write our own content. And so for the 50th anniversary of The Godfather, we were asked to come up with a special visual piece. So I thought I'd give it a shot and just started sketching a bunch of stuff on my InDesign. And I just started by making a list of all the deaths and see where that would take me. And so kind of identifying Godfather-y patterns from the movie by just making a visual database. And then this big dump eventually took the form of a quiz with primarily visual questions. So we kind of repurposed CAPTCHAs and We created visual matching games. And as you can see, the questions are primarily visual. And the writing is pretty deadpan and concise, which I think also helps. And the goal wasn't really to test people's knowledge. It's not like a trivia quiz that you can find on BuzzFeed or something. And it's not about actually solving it because there's not even a scoring system. It's really about revisiting like a familiar favorite with a bit of humor and gently poking fun at some of the patterns and themes from the movie. So again, the quiz is more of a vehicle here than an end. And so we recycled this format again because it worked for Succession. And we made more captchas. And again, here, like once this machine was built and once we kind of figured out what we're doing, it's all the work becomes just the photo research, the photo edit, and the writing. Like you do want to find the chairs from the actual Davos conference that matches the chairs from Succession. Like it's just like work like this that just, it's worth it, I feel. But it's just it's those little things I think that make that make a difference. And again, that's why you kind of need a graphic designer to do this work because no one else cares, I think. So yeah, what distinguishes these quizzes, I think, is the fact that the questions were visually crafted, the kind of showing, not the telling, the tone of the writing, the bit of humor kind of sets it apart. And sometimes I work on stories that are not funny at all, like this important investigative piece by Azmat Khan on American airstrikes that led to civilian casualties. And for this piece, the bulk of the work was for me to just go through hundreds of Pentagon records that Azmat managed to get to help identify excerpts and bits that accompany and support her reporting. So I really had to familiarize myself with the content in order to be able to tackle this piece. And so in early designs, we had conceived as like sidebar boxes that highlight particular cases of deadly airstrikes mentioned in the story. They had locator maps, they had graphics, they had numbers, they had satellite imagery. But this direction was just too interruptive to the main story. So we ended up working around Azmat's words to guarantee a smooth reading experience and really intervene where it's absolutely necessary, which I think ultimately was the right solution. So this is a case where like good design means very little design on the page. Very like little, like you want non-obvious design is good design in this case. And so the excerpts that we found were kind of used sometimes inline, inserted in her text. Sometimes they were used as just simple doc tears and key moments of the piece. So again, most of the design work here was research and editing and going through documents and identifying opportunities to show evidentiary support that reflect the reporter's thorough investigation. And then for the top cover, we tried a lot of different things. Some approaches were photo-based, others, were graphics-based, but then we ended up with a collage that included like poignant, incriminating excerpts that we came across in our research. And before I got into digital, I started in print and I worked on the print news design team where I had to lay out content and design around a lot of constraints and rules. And it was a really humbling learning experience because, the grid and literally every possible tab combination that we can do with 3 typefaces was already figured out. So that actually gives me time to just spend time with the story, focus on the actual visual edit, choice of photos, and the structure of the story. So I kind of learned how to work with really sensitive material and how to structure complex content to make it as accessible as possible to the reader. And my boss, who was my boss, who was amazing, Fred Bierman, he would encourage me to trust my editorial judgment and, try to write headlines or rethink the structure of an article or even think of the space or real estate allocated to a story So this investigation about Russian pilots bombing Syrian civilians in 2019 ended up taking 2 pages instead of 1 page. So like decisions like this that kind of develop while you're working on the story. So, trying to fit a big amount of content on a limited surface like the paper ends up like making you a tough editor, because unlike the web where you can just scroll forever, you need to make kind of tough choices when you only have a page to fill. So everything needs to kind of matter. But this rigorous training in grid and templates taught me also how to eventually break them. So I got to do that when I worked on these sort of special sections that are kind of one-off packages in print that come out usually on Sundays. So I got to kind of conceive, art direct, plan the production of these print packages every once in a while. And, some of them were photo-based, some of them were illustration-based. And for the illustrated ones, I always tried my best to integrate illustration as a major element on the page, as an integral element that shapes the print layout instead of just using it as a box next to other boxes of text. So for this one, for example, this COVID section, which is kind of a servicey guide, the illustrations were like literally separated by columns of text to show distance. So, it was a nice collaboration with Vinnie Newberg, the illustrator, and the design and illustration were like gradually coming together at the same time. This is another servicey section about COVID that we put together like in March 2020 when it was really scary in New York. And it kind of offers guidance on how to be helpful to others during the pandemic. And Braulio Amado created this cover that readers could cut out and hang on their doors as like a small gesture of gratitude to essential workers, which really took advantage of the physicality of the paper. Some sections were typographic, like this one about the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. And we kind of wanted this section to convey a feeling of urgency that's inspired by banners and protest posters. And we created these vertical posters that interrupt the horizontal flow of the content, like they're disrupting your layout. And again, taking advantage of the physicality of the paper, of the print product, and providing you an experience that you don't necessarily get online. So these print special sections sometimes end up looking very different from the way they're presented on the internet. So this was a package that published before the 2020 elections about the collision of pop culture and politics. And it's really about how public servants are memified and idolized with the help of the internet. So the online version was inspired by kind of like early web aesthetic, which made sense for the digital presentation. But in print, we went like a completely different direction. And my colleague, Andrew Sondren, and I, we went for like a print native typographic approach that was inspired by Thomas Paine's Common Sense pamphlet, which made more sense, again, for the print medium. And conceptually, we thought it would be powerful to repurpose and apply this very like sober, classical, highbrow aesthetic to think pieces about memes and standing. And it kind of pushes the point that our critic is trying to make, which is how these images and internet jargon have infiltrated our politics. This is another print section I worked on that is similar to the previous one in the way it repurposes certain familiar visual cues for other means. So this is an investigative package about fast fashion that published around the holidays, or like when gift guides start pouring out. And the design borrows visual cues from shopping catalogs, like these loud graphics and starbursts that look like advertising discounts. But when you look closely, they're actually communicating grim facts and numbers about the reality of the questionable labor conditions in the fashion industry. So this is a case of like trivial design or cute design used as a way to call attention to a very serious matter. So yeah, it's basically like a thorough investigation into the labor conditions in factories. This one was by far the most experimental one I got to make, and I can't believe they published it. But my colleague Andrew Saldrin and I teamed up again on this one, and we were asked to create a print adaptation for a series of 10 videos about online culture. And these videos kind of cover everything from dog memes to the dark side of fitness. And given the absurdity of the subject matter, which is the internet, and the absurdity of putting this on a piece of paper, we tried to think about the different reading experiences that both online and print provide, and kind of play with them. So, the internet is filled with interruptions and distractions. We try to recreate that reading experience on paper. So we asked Amanda, the writer, to annotate the 10 transcripts that she had written for the videos with fresh context, comments, and jokes, all of which appear only in print, which kind of gives this product a new life and this whole project a new life. So as you can see, the main transcript is in the middle, and then you have all those elements coming out of it. There are really footnotes or sidebars to kind of distract you from the core text. And again, this was another example of design driving the content. And we were lucky because the writer was game and excited to get weird and funny with us. We also commissioned full sheet poster illustrations for each article, on the back of it, by Eric Carter and Tracy Ma. And they kind of made them in this style of found imagery. And these illustrations interrupt the flow of the text and kind of force you to manipulate the product and kind of take it apart. And just as the internet is not read in a linear way, there's not really a correct way of reading this. So there are no page numbers. The pages can and should be kind of rearranged in different ways, and kind of creating meanings between the different visuals and the words. And not everyone enjoyed it, but it was fun to try. So yeah, basically when these interruptions are translated into print, obviously, they might feel seamless online, but they're way more challenging on paper. So, there are different ways of kind of packaging a story, sometimes about simply making a cover image that makes people want to click. Sometimes it's a higher design lift that requires the use of usual design tools to package certain stories and make them feel a bit special. Sometimes it's about not making something feel special and just, making it about the content, putting your editor hat on and, being more subtle about the content, about the design. And sometimes, the design shapes the actual story and drives the content and the writing. And they're all kind of valid storytelling tools, but it really depends on what the story wants to be. And I guess the editorial judgment really is what is crucial here. And I feel like before joining the Times, I just worked on a bunch of random stuff where I got to get weird a little bit, try a few things, print things wrong, but also learning a lot from editors and writers and kind of really understanding them and trying to help them convey what they're trying to say in an easier way or a more obvious way. Obvious to us, a lot of things are not obvious to writers, actually. They really can't imagine things the way we can, so we just need to show them. So yeah, I worked on a lot of magazines. I worked on bilingual books when I was in Lebanon. So also these constraints of reading right to left, left to right, they kind of always trade me to always have an obstacle I need to overcome in the design. And I've always kind of experimented with the physicality of the paper and the print, which is something I don't work in print anymore, but I've always enjoyed doing. And also, I worked with Ion Design for a bit, and they let me do those like stories every once in a while in their print section that were basically like writing funny things. But for me, really writing is designing. So I really use design as a writing tool because it's just easier. Also because English is my third language, it's easier for me to communicate something with visuals than with words. So I kind of try to use all those different tools to be able to express myself sometimes. It's like memes, essentially. So I don't really have much time to do outside work stuff, but this was one project that we published that I worked on after the Beirut explosion. I partnered up with the Smudge, which is this like great little magazine from LA, and that's like in the style of 60s, 70s press zines. And so they offered us to just like take over the whole magazine. So we even kind of reworked the masthead, made it in Arabic, worked again with Raphael Macaron to create these. And we kind of basically, we were guest editors and guest art directors and designers and everything. So we commissioned the content for it and the art for it. And we sold it and raised money for NGOs after the port explosion in 2020. And worked with artists from Lebanon and like the neighboring area. So yeah, thank you.